everybody, to the third installment of the SWAN Americas Alliance. Today we have a fantastic presentation, three presentations, to analyze, bridge, communicate the ABCs of smart water. I'm going to let the moderator, Jennifer, introduce the presenters here in just a second. But before we get into that, we'll go through a couple slides. Next slide. So just a couple housekeeping notes. This is the third installment of the 16th SWAN Americas webinar, the third of this series. My name is Brent Thompson. I am with Badgermeter. My co-lead is Alexander Budolo from LADWP. And next. So SWAN Americas Alliance is the host. This is the SWAN Americas Americas Alliance. SWAN Network, Smart Water Networks Forum is the host. This was founded in 2010. We are the global lead of the hub for Smart Water Network. This is a global nonprofit, and we are really powered by everybody within the organization contributing with presentations and abstracts that were submitted. Next slide. So the SWAN Americas Alliance is considered one of the alliance is comprised of 4 different subgroups: the outreach events, which is hosting the webinar today, research and partnerships. This is comprised of anybody that is a member of the SWAN organization. We encourage anybody on this call, if you want to join one of the subgroups, please reach out to anybody within the leadership team. I can guide you to the correct people. Shirley is on this call. There's a link here. If you click on it, you can find some more information out. Yeah, and a special thanks to our utility review committee. Just a little bit about how these abstracts are submitted. They are presented in a blind format, and these 3 amazing people review these abstracts and grade them based off of content, the way that they were submitted as it relates to the specific webinar or theme that they're targeting, and they're graded on a score. Everything's blind. We grade the scores and apply them with the theme that they're fitted for the webinar, and we select the top 3 in each category to present in this webinar series. So again, thank you to our utility review committee. It is a lot of work, and we appreciate all the feedback they give. Okay, the SWAN Annual Conference, I think everybody that's a part of this webinar has probably heard about this by now. This is a fantastic event. It's the 12th annual conference. It's going to be in Washington, D.C. this year. I think the last time it was in the United States, it was in Miami, and it was by far one of the biggest attended events that SWAN has put on. 40 plus utility speakers. It really is an excellent event, and anybody that's involved in this, I highly suggest that you have take the time to attend this year. Yeah, and so today our moderator for this session is going to be Jennifer Zach. I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer and have her introduce herself a little bit more formally, but we want to thank Jennifer for taking the time today and hosting this webinar. So Jennifer, we do appreciate it from everybody at the events group, and I'll let you take it over from here.
Thank you, Brent. So it is a real pleasure to be here and moderate today's session. Mentor is a provider of enterprise asset management solutions built for water and wastewater. We include a whole suite that addresses maintenance management, asset performance management, asset condition, risk, and criticality analysis. And we are just delighted to be members of SWAN and to be supporting the mission and effort of bringing digital solutions to utilities for improving the stewardship of these critical assets and critical resources that we all look after. So delighted to be here, looking forward to learning from all our presenters today. So we'll want to get going. Please put your questions in the Q&A. We will be leaving time at the end for an opportunity to answer questions from today's presentations. And with that, we'll move to the next slide. So today we are talking about the ABCs of smart water. A for analyze, B for bridge, C for communicate. And each of these presentations is going to be touching on those important ideas and how they work together for achieving success in digitalization. We have Bill Kelly from Syrinix, Tim Reed from Tarrant Regional Water District in Texas, with Raja Singh from Cisco, and then Mark Riley with the City of Toledo, with Ian Robinson from Blue Conduit. So first up, we have Bill.
I will take it away then. Thanks, Jennifer. Good. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Bill Kelly here with Syrinix. I'm the Senior Vice President of Business Development with Syrinix. Syrinix is a company that specializes in understanding infrastructures and help utilities prolong the life of them. Next slide. Today's conversation is going to be about a client that we work with called Contra Costa Water District. Contra Costa Water District is based in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's about 25 miles northeast of San Francisco, Oakland area. They're the third largest utility in the US. They have 500,000 customers, 3 treatment plants, 41 storage reservoirs, 31 pumps stations. It's a very hilly area, so it's very dynamic. Today we're going to talk about a little area in the bottom blue. It's called the Morgan Territory, where they had a reoccurring issue. Contra Costa, just as a quick note, started in 1938. They're part of the California State Water Project, and they bring their water in from the Delta, from the Shasta Dam that's fed into the whole system. Next slide, please. So the area that we're talking about is the Morgan Territory. It's a very somewhat exclusive area where there's only 110 services, but they service all mainly horse ranches, more hobby farms that are out in some of the rural area of San Francisco. They've got an 8-inch AC pipe that runs down the middle of the Morgan Territory. It's a very vital pipeline that feeds water into it. The 110 services, 18 fire hydrants. It's in a very fire-prone area, so it's a very important area to get water to. Next slide. The water area is actually pretty unique in itself because they've got different services they provide. Besides the 110 connections, they also have 10 service agreements. I think it's 12 now for trucking water, so they have a fill station where they can fill water up. They also have some modified pressure zones where the houses are considerably higher than where the water main is, so they got additional pump systems on them. And then there's also wells in the area because it is it's an equestrian area where people have large horse farms, and these wells have a tendency to go dry over a period of time. Next slide, please. So what happened during the notice in 2026 is that they were having repeated leaks on the system out there. That's primarily due to the drought conditions on there. In 2019, this escalated a lot further, meaning they were seeing more problems in the area, and they were having ongoing pressure issues, and they were concerned about that 8-inch AC line breaking out there. They had experienced some breaks out there, but they were able to mitigate the problems. So the question is why? Next slide. So what happened is that there was the ranchers, the ranchers were out there filling up their storage tanks in the back of their tanker trucks, as shown in the picture here, and they're filling up from random hydrants along the Morgan Territory Road. This was causing problems for the network. Next slide. So the Contra Costa Water District, as part of the communication side of this, reached out to the community members and said, don't do this, don't fill up on the fire hydrants, it's bad for the water system. So the Contra Costa went out and installed a fill station. You can see this fill station right here, where where they've got a fire hydrant, they put a T on it, and then what's on the other side in that blue cage, or the green cage there, is a pressure reducing valve. So what they're trying to do is reduce the transient that happens when the system gets open and closed. So they put this up, they have the remote meters that the utility can use, and then they coordinated locking fire hydrants along that Morgan territory with the fire department because they didn't want them to go and fill their tanks from those fire hydrants. Next slide. Contra Costa approached us at the ACE conference, and then we actually started working with them to start monitoring the system. Next slide. We used one of our, what we call as our PipeMinder 1H, and it's a hydrant mount unit that's got a 4G system on it. You basically screw it onto on the fire hydrant, charge the fire hydrant, we can immediately start monitoring the system. Next slide. So what that does is the information from the 4G goes up to our cloud-based platform called Radar, communicates the information to Radar, and the client is able to access Radar through any desktop, laptop, phone that they can use. Next slide. So this is sort of the information we were looking at. So what we were seeing on this was a bunch of this is 5 of the 8 fire hydrant mount units that we had grouped together. This is by elevation, and we're seeing some pretty substantial transients inside the system. As you can see, towards the right third, you can see that large transient right there where there was a large transient on it. The next grouping of it, that's more of that's a automatic flushing valve that's in it. And then you can see one in the center, one more. So those are hydrants being opened up inside the system. Next slide, please. So this is what it looks like when someone is stealing water. This is the exact signature it is. So when you see the pressure on the system is at the first section where the hydrant's open, someone opens that up, there is roughly a 60 PSI pressure spike on the system. You can see the pressure decreases, the fill time on it, and then someone slams the hydrant closed, and then you have the high pressure spike on it, and then it goes back to its normal pressure. This is something that you would see when the fire department is practicing doing some flushing or some other type of work. What we did is some research with Contra Costa, and we realized that this fill time of about 10 minutes would fill a tank of about 700 gallons. So this is exactly what would coincide with that fill on that tank. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we looked at is we took the data that was received from Contra Costa that was sent up to Radar, and what we do is we triangulate the event that's going on. What we're trying to do is find out where this event is occurring on the Morgan Territory Road. So we could go into this pretty substantially, but basically we're taking the data from multiple points to pinpoint where the problem is occurring on that. Next slide. So what we're doing is when we look at this is we've seen that pressure amplitude that goes through it. This is something you would see in a burst or any time that a valve's opened up, is you're going to get some pressure that's going to come out of it. And then we use Joukowski's theory to calculate where this event is occurring inside the network. Next slide, please. So the way that the pressure transients propagate or move through the network is they move in a wave through it, sort of like amplitude, or if you're outside yelling, you can have a pressure transient that moves through the system. And then if it hits a dissimilar joint, it's going to bounce back, or if it hits a junction, it's going to, the amplitude is going to diffuse inside of it. So that's why when we're calculating the triangulation, we take in the customer's GIS information so we can see the pipe material and the different joints that are associated with it. Next slide, please. We've done numerous studies on this. Is one we did with one of our clients in the UK. So what we were able to do with this one is actually figure out the attenuations on this, where we can actually measure the different time it takes from the break or the simulated break that's in the center to the other devices. By going backwards, we can actually do that in reverse and picture where the water is being taken from the system itself. Next slide. So what we did is we took in, we're able to, and this is a screenshot of Radar right here. So we've got 2 devices. We're actually seeing where the event is occurring on this. If we pulled if this was a live demo and I had Radar, I'd take the little yellow guy from Google and drop them on the map, and we would look exactly at what fire hydrant where this event was taking from. So radar automatically flags this with the Cernic system, so then the client can see what's going on in the network. Ironically, these fills for the tanks generally happen that they sporadically Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, not on the weekends, but on Monday morning from 9 to 10, and then on Friday from really 2:30 to about 5 o'clock, we would see someone going to fill up the tanks. Next slide. Next slide. There it is. So the utility understands what's going on. So they took and they said, well, we know when they're going to fill up, and they've put out game cameras. They've put guys in trucks out there to identify what it is. They've locked the fire hydrants. The challenge that they have with the locking the fire hydrants in a very high fire area. So the customers in the area said, can't lock the fire hydrants because we've got all of our own hoses. We're going to fight a wildland fire if it happens here. So they had to remove those off. So they're working with the utility to get the customers to take and be responsible for the water there. So at one of the board meetings that happened in the spring of last year, they were actually able to show where the leaks were occurring inside the network and why they were happening. And the customers that were attending in the Morgan territory actually started using and utilizing some of the remote meters so they could actually start filling up the pressure reducing valve. The sad part about this is that there has been really no legal action against the people that are stealing the water. They've continued to do outreach to the area. They've worked on an emergency response plan on how to handle the imminent break on that old AC pipe that's out there. And then they're just continuing to do the pressure monitoring data on it. We've done extensive research on it. We figured out in the first 6 months of last year, 2021, that there was roughly 500,000 gallons of water taken. That's just under 2 acre feet. So, you know, being an acre foot at being like $500 to $700, it's not a lot of money and water loss, but it's the fear that that AC pipe is going to take and fail sometime in the future because the transients that are occurring when they're opening and closing those fire hydrants, that's going on right there. So that's really what the driving point is that we looked at, is that how do they prolong the life of that AC pipe? Next slide, please. And there I am. If you want additional information, we have it. This article was also featured in Source magazine, the Cal Nevada AWWA Source magazine. I think it was November of 2021. If you're interested in getting any additional information, or you can check our website, or you can reach out and talk to me on that individually. There you go.
Thank you, Bill. That was fascinating. I wrote down some questions. One of my questions was, what did the utility do with people? Very interesting that they haven't taken action. But we'll get into that in the Q&A. So thanks so much.
You're welcome.
So up next, we have Raja and Tim with Tarrant and Cisco. And they're going to talk about marriage and industrial grade marriage. I'm really excited about this one, talking about breaking down silos. So take it away, guys.
Great, thank you. I'm Raja Singh. I'm part of Cisco's IoT team, supporting our public sector customers. IoT at Cisco is focused on architectures and specific use cases. And if you look at Cisco's smart water architecture, we cover use cases from abstraction, treatment, and wastewater collection. We often end up being a bridge between the OT world and the IT world. And the story you're about to hear from Tim, one of Cisco's customers, illustrates this perfectly. With that, I'm going to let the star of the show, Tim, just help walk us down the aisle. I'll hand it over to you, Tim. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Raja. Okay, I appreciate the opportunity to present kind of our story and how, like the title of the presentation about building an industrial grade marriage between the IT and OT side. I will just to let you know, I am from the IT side, so that's just to kind of set where the conversation, where I'm coming from. That's the side of the house that I'm on. So real quick, a little bit about the Water District. We were founded in 1924, initially for flood control. And of course, over this long period of time, we've expanded into multiple roles. Really our biggest now being raw water, providing raw water to our customers in around 11 counties. We're currently working on an integrated pipeline project. If you go to our website, trwd.com, we've got a lot of good information on that, a lot of videos, but it's a partnership with Dallas Water Utilities. So we also have a lot of recreation activities that we do across our reservoirs, and then also our Trinity Trails, trailways along the 27 miles of floodway that we have on the Trinity River. So a lot of different things that the district does, but primary part I'll talk about as far as the IT, and then ICS OT group, SCADA, will be with our raw water division. So, okay, next slide. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to mention around this is a lot of times there's difficulty between these two groups, right? They're both sides have their own goals, the way they've always been operating. IT usually focusing on the business side, the typical office worker, and versus that industrial side of what it takes to run a plant, and what those actions that they take, how that can affect operations. Two totally different worlds, right? And so cybersecurity and all the regulatory things that are coming down the pipe, you're seeing more and more legislation and discussions with in Congress. Every time, what I've noticed is every time there's some type of event that happens, there's some knee-jerk reactions to begin talking about regulation again. So this is on everyone's mind, but it's a unique opportunity if there's a breakdown in communication between the groups to maybe start the conversation and come to the table and do it around cybersecurity, because there's goals on both sides. And this slide's really a perfect illustration of security tools, whether it's staff in-house or a contractor, of things that both groups are doing to address cyber events. And then in the middle there, you can see some areas where there can be conversation between, like endpoint protection, who's patching the HMI stations. A lot of times that is IT, or they're not getting patched at all. But you have to handle that differently than you do, of course, someone in finance, right? If an HMI station reboots for an operator in the middle of their shift, that could be catastrophic, and would also further hurt the relationship between the two groups as far as trust goes. Perimeter firewalls, whether that's at the firewall layer coming in from the internet or between internal systems, and then network segmentation. But where this ends up being, not only we have the cybersecurity side of things, we also have the need for information. So I know in the past, and even still in some cases, we air gap networks. That's beginning. The practicality of that continues to decline, because with everything in the world today, we're very hungry for information, right? We've got departments wanting to look at how to ingest that data, to make decisions off of it, which is a good thing. Whether it's energy management or doing pump efficiencies, curves, or whatever it is. There's a lot of data there that can be ingested, and so we've got to be able to provide that information. So depending on how the system's laid out, that can sometimes be a challenge. It's not enough now just to take data from a historian. A lot of the groups want to see live real-time data from the sensors across the system. So that's another area where there's a goal for the organization to get that data. How can the two teams work together to achieve that? Because at the end of the day, you're going to have to provide that data. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up, the cyber side. That's a good way to start the conversation. So, okay, go ahead, next slide. Okay, and the biggest tip that I can give on this for anyone that's struggling in this area to get these teams to communicate, I'll just tell you about some things that I've done for organizations that I've worked for and currently work for to increase the success. And really that's about understanding the culture of the organization. So we talk about regulation, we talk about cybersecurity, goals, all these things, but at the end of the day, it's about the people. And if you don't get that right, none of the other stuff is going to work. It'll all be a battle for control. And so keeping that in mind as you have these conversations, understanding that culture is very important. And that may take some time. What I found is, again, IT and OT, they all have their own goals, okay? And usually either it's someone from the SCADA team or someone from IT. One side's going to have to make the move to try to start that conversation, okay? So whichever side it comes from, it doesn't matter. But it just being about a conversation. Change management. So at the Water District, we had a pretty extensive change management process in our IT group. But that's pretty common now. IT normally has a pretty good change management process. And one of the things that we did is we invited the ICS group into our change management meeting. They actually designated a member to come to every one of our change management meetings. And what was powerful about that is we both, talking about culture and operations, that's where we really begin to learn how those two groups work. So if IT was going to schedule a network change, we learned from that by that member setting on the change board how us making this change on the network was going to affect this pump station, or if we needed to upgrade firmware on a switch that's setting in a VFD cabinet, how that was going to affect the operations, and really begin to learn how that works. And that the other powerful part about that is that they had a voice in the decision of whether we move forward with that change or not, because that's the other thing that happens a lot of times. Again, it's about control, but that's understandable. It's not just about trying to hold on to something. From the OT side, it's about we have to pump water at the end of the day, or we have to make sure that we're meeting our service level agreements, and having something that can alter that is a serious concern. So IT needs to understand that as well. It's not just like you're rebooting a switch in a closet that affects an office building. This could take down an entire pump station, and not only cause problems for the customer, but could cause damage, could be a safety issue. There's so many different things. So really learning how different that environment is. So really with us, with our change management, that went on for about a year, where they sat on our change management. They continue to sit on our change management group. They come to we have that meeting every Tuesday is when we approve our changes. And then on Thursdays is when basically our change window. Now that can vary depending on what our operations look like at the time. If we're, say we're in high capacity mode, we may delay changes until we go back into normal capacity, just to reduce the likelihood of something happening. Because that cannot, that's always, some things are outside of your control. You can do all the checks and balances, and then something still doesn't work right. And then, but later, our OT group ended up implementing their own change management process that aligned with ours. We use ServiceNow to track everything. And so they do that within their own team. So you begin to see that spread throughout the organization. And we're a part of theirs as well. Physical landscape, another really important thing. So for my side, Making sure that all my staff on the network and the systems team, whether it's the data center operator, whether it's our cybersecurity folks, or the network team, make sure that all of them go out really on a regular basis and understand how the physical, what does the pump station look like? You can't just sit at your desk and really understand the magnitude of what you're doing. It just doesn't make sense until you get in front of it and see it. And that's when you really know what you're doing. So making sure that they understand that. And then also same thing, invite people from the ICS side of the house to see the operations, the behind the scenes. What do things look like in the data center? What does the firewall look like? Really opening that up. And then training, making sure that you, from either side, that you offer opportunities to learn about their environments. These pictures here, I thought these were neat illustrations. This is actually a group of our on the top picture of our OCS, members of our OCS and our IT network team, doing a whiteboard session on network deployments as we've been going and upgrading infrastructure. And that's just a powerful image to me, to see those groups come together and work without and have that trust. And then those are the other pictures, two folks on my network team, Jake and Adam, that are putting together a network cabinet at one of our new pump stations. And again, getting out in the field and really understanding that environment. But all this stuff, everyone worked together on. We didn't operate in silos. And another thing to point out as we go through some of the other slides and stuff about the architecture, I guess we can go ahead and go to the next slide, actually. And this is a pretty busy slide. This is one from Cisco that kind of lays out some of the things we've been doing throughout our environment. One of our goals being security, of course, and segmentation across the network between the business network and the ICS network, and beginning to map out what can talk to what, okay? But another component when I talked about control in the beginning was making sure that we implemented a solution that allowed so IT having some oversight in the way that the solution is laid out across the system, it being consistent throughout the whole network, but then enabling those users on the network team, or I'm sorry, on the ICS team, to be able to, let's say it's a port configuration change, where they can get in and make modifications on their own without IT intervention, because that could be another block whenever having to put in a ticket and wait on it for something to be done. So making sure you build that into your segmentation plan and your conversations. So I'm kind of starting to run low on time, but it's kind of hard to talk about all this in the short period of time, but I'd be glad to answer any questions during the Q&A or at another time about exactly how we made this work. But at the end of the day, it's about listening and communications to be successful with this. And I've got one more slide, but it's just more about some of the architecture that we're using from Cisco, that DNA center. That's a real important part of our solution in order to enable users outside of IT to safely make changes within their own domain throughout the system. So, all right, that's all I've got until the Q&A time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tim and Raja. That's I'm sure we'll get some great questions on building that collaboration. I love your advice to get people out in the environment, understand the context of what your coworkers are doing and where your common mission is. So thanks, guys. There'll be some great questions in the Q&A. So up next we have Toledo and Blue Conduit talking about lead service replacement. We've got Mark Riley and Ian Robinson, we'll take it away, and then we'll have a few minutes at the end for Q&A for all of our presenters. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And thank you so much to SWAN and to help and facilitate, and all the volunteers who helped in organizing this. My name's Ian. I am the president COO of Blue Conduit, and I'm standing up with the real protagonist of our story, or metaphorically, Mark Riley from the city of Toledo, about the work that we're doing to use AI to reduce lead exposure and promote environmental justice in Toledo. Mark, you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having us. I am very excited to be here with Ian and talk about our lead service line program. Without Ian and Blue Conduit, I don't know where we'd be at, but we'll talk more about it. So I'll turn it over to Ian.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mark. Next slide, please. So that's a bit of a repeat on the first slide, but same ideas, same colors even. Next slide. So just briefly about Blue Conduit, relatively new into the water space. So Blue Conduit was founded in 2019 using machine learning to help communities locate their lead service lines, starting really out of research done in Flint in 2016 to help that community find and replace their lead service lines quickly, and taking these methodologies to help other communities. And that's how we came in to work with Mark in Toledo, and how we're working with many other communities. But we'll focus right now, obviously, on the work we're doing with Toledo. Next, please. Mark, do you want? So here we have a picture from a press conference picture of you showcasing the a lead pipe and also a non-lead pipe. You want to tell us about this event here?
Sure. Due to the American Rescue Act funding we received, we had a rollout to help our customers identify their lead service line. So what we have going on is last year we had a partial lead service line replacement program. We have gone, thanks to the ARPA funding, we are now doing a full lead line replacement. So if you look at this picture, I was doing a presentation on how our customers could assist us in identifying what type of material they have coming into their home, into their meter. So what we call a 3-part test, where number one, if you don't know what type of pipe you have, and you don't want to check, we will send someone out to investigate. But if you didn't mind checking what type of pipe, it's just a 3-part test where you take a penny. If your pipe is the same color as a penny, that tells us you have copper. You scrape the pipe and you get a nickel look that tells us you have iron. And the third one would tell us if you have lead. So we did this big rollout about 2 or 3 weeks ago because we want to get a huge community involvement in this program.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, next slide. So I kind of, when I see that picture, for me, it really showcases like what 2 years of effort have been of us working together in terms of where things started in 2020 when Blue Conduit first started talking to the city of Toledo. At the time, the estimate was that it was going to take more than 20 years to replace the city of Toledo's 30,000 lead service lines, that it was, program was just getting started. There were a lot of uncertainty about where the lead service lines were located, where they were not located, how they were going to generate both the information to make a compelling case about funding in order to mobilize efforts. And now where we are 2 years later, where that estimated timeline for completing the service line replacement has been shrunk by 13 years. And so when I see that picture on the previous slide, it showcases kind of the effort that's gone in over these 2 years to accelerate the pace of service line replacement in Toledo. Mark, you have a...
Yeah, sure. See, our program overview, we wanted to ensure that our residents had safe, clean water. we had developed a multi-year full lead service lead program, but we wanted to basically see how we can expedite the process. As a city, we needed actionable, accurate service of our lead inventory for our lead replacement program. So that's where Blue Conduit came in, because we lacked reliable information about our service line material. This certainly delayed our process, and it's just, with Blue Conduit, it has improved the process we're currently doing in identifying where lead is located.
Next slide. So the way that Blue Conduit worked with the city of Toledo in doing this is really trying to not just put the act of how can we locate where the lead service lines are, but how might we be able to use this information in such a way that all of the stakeholders can use this. So both the city, but also community organizations, residents themselves. So we applied for and received an environmental justice grant from the EPA with all of the partners on this screen in order to develop this statistical model and then use the outputs of it to support the work that all of them need to do. Next slide. So I guess before we kind of get into it is kind of a baseline of why are statistical methods used to locate lead service lines. These are pictures of, service lines being those pipes that connect the water main to the individual home. Records about those are generally, in the kind of state that you see here across the country. There's not a lot of reliability. There's just, until recently, there has not been a requirement for water utilities to maintain or report on those records to regulators. And so in many cases, there just were not records. And in the case of Toledo, there was a lot of questions about the reliability of the information that they had, and that was really a barrier to accelerating the rate of service line replacement. So what we did was we worked with the city of Toledo to think about how might we use the same machine learning methods used in Flint to help the city of Toledo locate their lead service lines. Next slide. So what we used was understanding that field verification is the only certain way to know 100% what the service line material is at a specific address, but there is not resources to go and dig up every address. So our team at Blue Conduit worked with Mark to think about, okay, if we have funding for a couple hundred investigations scattered across the city, what would be the most advantageous locations for us to go in and inspect in order to verify service line material? And one of the key things for us to think about in doing this is treating the historic records with the appropriate amount of skepticism, knowing that they're going to be helpful for any statistical model, but they're not going to tell you what the service line material is. So we went out Mark's team went out and used a hydrovac truck to inspect at 200 locations across the city. This map on the right shows you where the records that the city had matched exactly what was found in the ground. And what this shows you is that there's a lot of information that was learned from that hydrovac inspection that is now being used to inform where the city is prioritizing its service line replacement program. We were able to use that information from that to develop the statistical model predicting the service line material at every address, which, as we had talked about before, used both for the service line predictions for the replacement program, but also knowing that this is a many-year program to inform residents about what the likely service line material is at their address. Next slide, please. So with the results from that inspection program, we built a statistical model based on other information available about each of the parcels and developed this heat map for Mark's team that shows kind of at a neighborhood level, the estimated concentration of lead service lines across the city of Toledo, which this information is then used to put together the replacement schedule. You see on the left side of which neighborhoods the city plans to attack in which years going forward to be able to get the lead out of the ground from the places where it is most likely concentrated. Next slide. And Mark will talk about kind of how this information is being shared with the public and how they're not just sharing information with the public, but also getting the information from the public too, to continue updating the map.
Well, as a city, we put on our website a informational page that will help all of our customers and all of our residents with the lead service program. It gives them, we have FAQs, we provide information, we provide mapping, we also provide the program schedule. This helps with our community outreach, whereas anyone that has a question about our program, they can go onto our website and receive all the information they need. Say, for example, if they want to see if their home, there was a probability of them having lead, they can go onto this map, type in their address, and what will come up will say, hey, there's a probability that you do have lead or you don't, there's a chance that you do not have lead, depending on when your house was built. And it really has, we found it's really helped improve our program. It also helps us assist with customers identifying the type of material they have in their pipe. So with this map or with our website, we've been able to really amp up our program as far as identifying where we possibly have lead. When we look at our records that were really reliable, we showed that we probably had about 3,000 lead service lines in the city. But through our investigation, we're finding out that we're having more. So with this community engagement website, and also we've been doing some community engagement where we've been going out to community centers, speaking with their community groups. So with that, this has been a lot of help working with Blue Conduit.
So if you go to the next slide. So that shows kind of a parcel level view. You can zoom in even further for residents on the map. The next slide will show, as Mark was talking about, there's the opportunity for residents to go and inspect the material in their home. Next slide. And then they can update that information. Oh, that's Mark giving a video. So what I guess we're talking about is there's just a lot of information that's going out there, both for the city to share, but also for the city to receive. The next slide shows the page that the city has to have residents click in and get information from the residents, which goes in not just to inform the, for the city's records, but it flows right into the statistical model so that the predictions continue to update over time. And so as more and more is learned through the work that Mark's team is doing, that flows to Blue Conduit and our algorithm updates, and then that updates the predictions for the city to use to continue to guide both its replacement program and also its education efforts. So next slide. FAQs that you see on the city website. Next slide. Yeah, so that talks about the continual updating of information. So that's where the machine learning comes in. It continues to learn over time so that the city has all the latest and best information to inform its decisions. And so residents have access to the latest and greatest information as well. And I think that is our last slide. So, and Mark, do you have anything it's been great to work with the city of Toledo in this, the lessons that have been learned, to share with the community members as well, and to really show how this has galvanized, and not this alone, but a lot of things galvanizing the action to accelerate service line replacement in the city of Toledo. Okay, well, that's it. So thank you so much to everybody and to SWAN, and really excited for the Q&A. I think I'll hand it off to Jennifer.
I think we may have lost Jennifer. So Brent, if you don't mind, would you be able to guide us through the Q&A? If not, I'm Shirley from SWAN. I'm happy to step in.
Sure, not a problem.
Okay, thanks, Brent.
So there's a couple questions that came in. Let's see, the first is directed towards Cernix. And the question is, what is the accuracy that we can expect from the triangulation feature?
It's a great question. The accuracy is really dependent on how clean the GIS information is on the system. So if you have really good GIS, then you're able to get within a meter, 3 feet to 2 meters, 6 feet of that. So we're very accurate on that. If you're trying to identify an equipment failure or equipment malfunction on it, if you get within 6 feet, you're pretty close to where the event's occurring on it. So 3 to 6 feet is pretty accurate on it.
That's impressive. And I have a question for the last speakers, Bukwando. And with the lead inspection and the customer engagement that you guys have with the interface where customers can go in and look at their house, do you have any data associated with how many customers are actually using that feature? And do you have any feedback from the actual city, from your users on what they're taking away from that data?
Yeah, so I'll answer this. Mark had to step away briefly, but I know that or just came off mute. So Mark, if you want to talk about, if you can, the response from the city. I know that in the couple weeks since the release of the platform, there have been hundreds of residents who have submitted photos and information to the website for the city to then do QA and QC on those images to verify that. And there's on both of the links, there's feedback links for residents to submit questions or to submit information or concerns about the data that's there. So it's been very well received. I know they've presented at a lot of different community meetings, city council meetings in the last couple of weeks, really trying to get residents engaged with this program. There's also billboards. So if you're driving down I-75 in Toledo, you'll also see information about this as well.
Yeah, excellent. I think that's a phenomenal feature and something that I think most utilities can learn from, I think. Looks like Jennifer's back. Jennifer, we're just going through the question and answer session. If you want to jump in here, if not, I can continue.
Thank you. Thanks for jumping in there. Our
Sure.
network failed here in Phoenix, but thankfully I was able to get back, always at an inconvenient time. So yes, please take the next question and I'll jump in with mine in a moment.
Okay. Yeah, so the last question that I had was for Tim and Raja as it relates to bridging the gap between IT and OT. And it's pretty generic. What is the biggest challenge when you are trying to converge the two and get away from the silos? What is the biggest challenge in bridging between IT and OT?
Tim, you want to go first and I'll go second?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Yeah, it really with me it's the communication. So when I first came to the district, I had a lot of work to do to rebuild some of those. There was a fractured relationship between the two groups. I'll just say that, and really just taking the step to as the new infrastructure manager to call the people in that group and go out and meet with them wherever their location is, and just try to understand about what happened in the past, and just let them know that we want to work together and go forward, and just open that line of communication. The IT has a tendency to be very, very dominant when they get into different areas and say that they just do the things that they're comfortable with and don't take the time to listen to the customer. I tell my team to make sure we always want to operate basically as if we're a utility ourselves, like we're the ISP. Mm-hmm. We're just providing that Ethernet connection. And what do we need to do at that Ethernet connection level to meet the requirements of the customer? So just being customer focused, even though we're all internal employees, at the end of the day, that's really our customer. And I know I had a question too about change management. How did we get them to come to the meeting? And really, there's no reason. It's hard to think of a reason why they wouldn't, because they didn't have to do anything. It was just about coming and observing and listening to what we do to see if it'd be something that they would be interested in. Again, just making sure you don't have a heavy hand up front. And people are usually open to that. So that's the way we approached it.
That's great. Thanks, Tim. Jennifer?
So a question for Cyrenix, I don't know if this was answered, but there was a technical question about the accuracy of the triangulation. Were you able to address that, Bill? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, we got that one. Thanks, Jennifer.
Okay, great. And then for Cyrenix also, have you used this application in any other different settings or types of utilities?
Yeah. So what we do is we call this as part of our network calming package, where we actually create a deployment plan on where to put the devices out the network. And then what we do is we tell them where their problems are, what we think their potential causes of water main breaks and leaks are in the network. So it's part of our network calming deployment planning that we help clients understand their network better. So it's really the first step in addressing leaks and breaks is figuring out what's causing those, have them calm them down, so then they can move forward with looking at the other stuff like other non-revenue water loss issues. Great,
thanks, Bill. So a question came in for Toledo and Blue Conduit. For cities that want to follow the lead of Toledo, what are the minimal data sets needed to start? And if I have them, how much time until that city can really start to engage the community?
So I'll take this one. So that's a great question to think about. And I think first, in terms of the minimal data sets, it's starting wherever you are. I think you starting at whatever starting point a city is at, you then start applying best practices and statistics with the information that you have. Some of the most common pieces of information that we're looking at are any parcel information that describes the homes, historic records about service line material, age of home, property information, things like that. But even if that information isn't available, this is possibly even more helpful because there's that much more unknown or uncertainty. And in terms of engaging the community in the timeline for when you can do that, there's starting them earlier in the process is always better, or engaging them in a very open, in a way where you're seeing them as a true partner in this, that you're valuing their input and that they are really seeing them as a crucial, that the information is both to inform the decisions of the utility, but really that there's a real benefit to building trust by sharing the information that you have with residents and doing that in a way that can help foster that. So that's both in the digital way through maps and through platforms to get that information from them, but also physically when you're going out into different types of meetings and you have forums where you can do this as well. And Mark had to hop off for a family thing. He would have talked in more detail, and I'm happy to connect you with him if you have more questions as well.
Sure. Well, that's actually the perfect place to wrap up. We're at the top of the hour. But that really speaks to the theme that I saw and heard in each of the presentations, and that is fundamentally one of human collaboration, empowered by digital tools. Even in the case of the Contra Costa water rustlers, what Bill was describing was the utility really still trying to turn their customers into allies, not adversaries. Breaking down internal silos, and Tarrant has great, real concrete ideas on how to build collaboration for common goals, and then engaging the community in Toledo, again, towards a common goal of health and well-being. So thank you to all of our presenters. These have been fabulous presentations. I know we weren't able to get to all questions. I know each of these guys would be happy to engage with you on email, so please reach out, get their contact information. And just to note that Shirley placed in the chat, we do have a survey for feedback. SWAN would really appreciate your input on the value of this webinar and how we can continue to bring great program to you. The link is in there. And Brent, Shirley, would you like to wrap it up?
I just want to say one more time, thank you to our utility review committee. You know, without their input and selection process, we wouldn't be having this webinar today. And thank you to Shirley and the entire SWAN team that helps organize and put on this event. And of course, to my co-lead, Alex, and everybody that joined and all of our presenters. It was fantastic. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining.